Wide receiver busts for Jamie, Kenny Gallaudet. He's wide receiver 24. He's going 59th overall. So right, same spot-ish. Yeah, same spot as James Robinson. Spot-ish.
That just sounds crazy.
Same-ish spot. And yes, it does. Kenny Gallaudet. And Brandon Cooks. Is Brandon Cooks a bust at 102nd overall?
No, again, this was pre-ADP conversation. So, again, I know the list you're working off. It's the story on the site, but as if you read it, you won't see a word of ADP mentioned, and you see me say a lot. If he's drafted in this range, I would stay away from him. At this value, I think it's fantastic for Brandon Cooks. So the updated version of the story that I'm working on now for our next magazine, Brandon Cooks will absolutely not be listed as a bust.
Okay, let's take a look at where he went. You took him last night or Tuesday night in round 7, just ahead of Will Fuller, his former teammate. Okay, so how do you feel about Brandon Cooks, who has been no worse than, I think, 19th per game in 5 of the last 6 seasons?
Well, he's an absolute wild card based on the quarterback situation. And the nice thing about Brandon Cooks, despite every team passing him off to the next team, he's played with some very good quarterbacks, obviously. Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Jared Goff, and he was still good, and Deshaun Watson. So it's been a pretty good career for Brandon Cooks for the spots that he's played and the quarterbacks that he's played with. That won't be the case in 2021 if there is no Deshaun Watson. Tyrod Taylor or Davis Mills, whoever ends up starting there, is not Deshaun Watson. I don't think that's breaking news. So it's going to be tough for him, I think, to have the same level of production. That being said, if you get him after round 6 or round 7, it's absolutely worth taking a shot on Brandon Cooks. Forget about Deshaun Watson even playing. But if Deshaun Watson's playing, this is a guy who should be going in round 5. So just depends on when you're doing your draft, how comfortable you feel with drafting him, what your roster build is. But he's going to be the number 1 receiver there if he stays there. You never know what the Texans decide to do, because this is a team that's tearing everything down to hopefully start to rebuild in 2022.
All right, Heath, fill in the blank. If Deshaun Watson is starting in week 1 for the Texans, and he's going to play the full season, Brandon Cooks should be drafted in round blank. Jamie said, I think 5, right?
5, yeah.
I would say 4. I had him at wide receiver 16 when I was projecting him with Deshaun Watson.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think it seems like there's like a 0% chance that we know when we're drafting that Deshaun Watson's playing the whole season.
Right, but if you're drafting today, Brandon Cooks probably has more upside, than any player that's going in round 8 or something like that.
Yes, if you're telling me that it's Brandon Cooks and Laviska Shenault, I'm taking Brandon Cooks.
Yes. Okay, good. All right, but what about Kenny Gallaudet? Kenny Gallaudet, go ahead, make your case.
I don't know what to expect with him with Daniel Jones. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's just, this is a guy that I don't want to label him injury prone, but, he struggled with injuries last year. Is he going to get the type of targets that he needs to be successful from a quarterback that still has to prove himself? And I think Daniel Jones can get Kenny Gallaudet the ball. I think they're going to scheme to get Kenny Gallaudet plenty of targets. It's not about that. But this is a very crowded receiving core with a run-first offensive coordinator. And if Saquon Barkley is right, bust candidate or not, he's going to lead this team in touches as he should and dominate touches on this team. They're going to run the ball as much as they possibly can. And so Gallaudet with Shepard and Tony and Ingram and everything that they have at the receiver position, I just don't think he's going to be successful enough to be what he was or close to what he was. And he's probably being drafted fairly accurate, but there are some other guys that I would consider in the conversation with him, like Cortland Sutton, like Brandon Ayuk, like Jamar Chase, other receivers that are, considerable number 1 options on their respective teams that may or may not have better quarterback situations.
Do you think Daniel Jones will do better than per 16 games, 3,338 yards and 16 touchdowns, which is obviously pathetic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That is what David Blau and Jeff Driscoll did in their 8 games times 2. That is what they were on pace for. 3,338 yards, 16 touchdowns back in 2019. With that,
also a team that didn't have a running game and threw the ball all the time.
With that garbage, Kenny Gallaudet had 30 catches, 550 yards, and 4 touchdowns on 54 targets.
In 8 games.
In 8 games. So that's
terrible.
No, it's not.
60
that's
catches
60
for
catches, 1,000 yards. And 8 touchdowns.
60 catches, 60 catches, 1,100 yards, and 8 touchdowns on 108 targets.
Yeah, I don't see him doing that on 108 targets.
He did it. I mean, that's what he does. He gets a lot of. He's a yards.
He did that over 8 games. I don't think he's going to do it over 16 games with Daniel Jones.
But he's like what, 18 yards per catch, 17 yards per catch.
That's with Matthew Stafford.
So 60, 1,108 is pretty close to wide receiver 24, right?
I would guess it's a little better, but yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, okay. Yes. Look, there was only really just Marvin Jones, no run game, different philosophy, probably a worse defense. All right, Heath, your wide receiver busts. Oh, CeeDee Lamb and Mike Evans. Okay, so they're going as wide receiver 13 and 15 respectively.
Yeah, and I'll start with Mike Evans because the CeeDee Lamb one is less comfortable for me. It's easy to make the Mike Evans bust call, even though he's been good for a lot longer. And we do this with quarterbacks a lot, but we don't do it with receivers very often. If Mike Evans had scored last year at his career touchdown rate, he would have scored 7 fewer touchdowns. That would have dropped him from wide receiver 11, where he finished, to wide receiver 27, right behind Cole Beasley. I am very concerned, really for everyone in Tampa Bay, about target share and being able to maintain that type of efficiency. Like he's always, and it's important to say that, like, it's not like before 2020, Mike Evans had a low touchdown rate. He was like 5.7%. He was pretty good at scoring touchdowns. He had kind of a weird every other year thing going on. And we could make the joke about how every time he scores at least 12 touchdowns, he has a terrible touchdown year the following year, like he did in 2015 and 2017. But it's more just that you can't sustain that type of touchdown rate, and 109 targets does not produce a top 15 wide receiver.
It's just he does it every year, at least in terms of
he's never done it with that target rate, though.
Yeah, but I'm just saying at the end of the day, he's a top 12 receiver, 5 of 7 seasons, top 8 in 4 of his last 5 in non-PPR. A little bit worse in PPR. He's not a huge catch guy, but it's weird. He's such an accomplished receiver.
But is
he the best one from 2014 now?
Yes.
By far, right?
Well, look, I mean, there's Robinson, there's Cooks, Evans. No, Devontae Adams. Is he in that class?
Oh, yeah.
He was. He just was a late bloomer. What a freaking draft class. Incredible.
They all went behind Sammy Watkins, though.
They did. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Heath. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay.
If there's anything to add, it's just he's so consistent. Maybe in different ways, but as a fantasy option, he's just always good. You know?
I don't find myself drafting him in PPR, but in non-PPR, I will take my chances on the touchdown still being there for him. So that's kind of the gamble I think I take. But I'm with Heath. I think he's going to get overdrafted a little bit. I mean, you think about all these guys that Tom Brady has to throw to. He may still be number 1. And who knows if Godwin, stays healthy over the course of 17 games, and Antonio Brown stays healthy over the course of 17 games. But if Gronk is still catching passes and Howard is back and you have Antonio Brown and they decide to work in some of the younger guys that they still have on the team, it could be hard. We could be looking at another sub 120 target season for Mike Evans. And if the touchdowns disappear and he just gets to remember, they were like basically begging to get him 1,000 yards. They were trying to do it before the season ended last year to keep the streak alive. They're title hunting, so they may start to sit some guys and rest if he has any ailments, and he's been banged up a few times over the last couple seasons.
Does this matter to you? If he played 7 games, he played week 17, but he got hurt after 11 snaps. 7 games. He
got hurt, or they pulled him because they got the 1,000 yards?
No, he got hurt because I don't even know if he played the first playoff game. I think he may have missed that game at Washington. No, he played. Oh, he played. He had a huge game. But remember, he was like questionable all week. Sorry, but he was hurt. He was great in those 7 games. I mean, he was on pace for almost for 1,300 yards, 1,342.
In what 7 games?
7 games with Antonio Brown after the Brown acquisition, or after
Godwin played all 7 too.
Pretty sure, yeah. So I think
Brown missed what, 2 of those?
No, Brown played all 8 games down the stretch.
When did he get hurt?
When did Brown get hurt?
Yeah.
In playoffs, maybe. I don't know. I can look, but I'm almost positive Brown played all 8 regular season games. Evans was by far the best one, not necessarily in targets, but in production. It was weird, He had 2.
He scored touchdowns. It wasn't that complicated.
No, it was. He was on pace in those 7 games for 1,342 yards. So, but he had 2 mega games with 110 yards, 181 yards. Other than that, he wasn't really that great with yards. But I don't know. He still continued to produce. He also was among the league leaders in red zone and green zone targets. Maybe I'm going too in depth here. I don't know. But he was actually better when Brown came back. It was earlier in the season. There was this weird thing where Chris Godwin played and Mike Evans got on average 3 or 4 targets per game. It was very strange. I think they started throwing more. Maybe Brady was just doing better later in the year, but Evans didn't seem to be too affected by Brown. Okay, that's it. CeeDee Lamb.
That's a pretty massive leap if everybody's okay. And I know the Amari Cooper thing with maybe missing the start of training camp, but I haven't seen anything at all that suggests that Amari Cooper's thing could linger into the regular season. I think he has enough of a connection with Dak Prescott where missing a week or 2 of training camp's not going to make too big of an impact. And Lamb was awesome as a rookie. I think he's very good. He's a top 12 dynasty wide receiver for me, but with Gallup there and them now moving Gallup into the slot a little bit with Blake Jarwin coming back with everybody there, I just don't see him getting enough targets because he wasn't particularly efficient last year to be a top 15 wide receiver.
Efficient in the first 5 games or efficient over the course of the season?
Over the course of the season.
Well, how was his efficiency in those
first? It was very good the first 5 games.
Well, I think that matters, obviously.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, if he could, if those first 5 games are what mattered and not the rest, then.
Well, those first 5 games had the starting quarterback there.
Right. But it was also 5 games.
Yeah, but I'd rather judge him off the first 5 games with Dak as opposed to the next 11 with Andy Dalton and DiNucci and whatever else they were throwing out there.
Oh, that Ben DiNucci game, that was so sad. Yeah, this is a good point. But wide receiver 13, we actually talked about this on the breakout show. It's hard to. He would basically have one of the most. If he's able to finish top 12, and Amari Cooper does what Amari Cooper usually does, then it would be extremely.
Dak's QB1.
What's that?
Then Dak's QB1.
He'd be obviously in the discussion. But what I was going to say was, looking at all the sophomore wide receivers who have finished top 12 since that Beckham Robinson class, most of them did not have a receiver as good as Amari Cooper. So Juju was the exception. Juju did it with Antonio Brown, who had a huge year. And Roethlisberger, I think, was QB1 that year, right? That was, I don't know, he was up there. Yeah, Antonio Brown got hurt in the playoffs, Jamie. He missed the NFC Championship game. He got hurt in the New Orleans game. And if you look at Mike Evans' game log, I mean, 4 targets in week 1, 4 targets in week 3, 2 targets in week 6, 2 targets in week 7. Those were the games that Chris Godwin played. It was really weird. And then Antonio Brown came in week 9, and he was consistently targeted in that stretch, except for week 17 when he left early.